I knew my family had turned against me the moment my son-in-law smiled and said, "You should probably start packing." He wasn't joking. He was standing in the living room I'd spent 36 years paying for, speaking to me like I was a guest who had overstayed his welcome. My daughter didn't say a single word. She just stared at the floor. If family stories that reveal what betrayal really feels like speak to you, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe to Family Betrayal. Every story here reminds us that trust can disappear in a single conversation. And before we go any further, the faces, photos, background clips, and scenes you see in this video are simply visual storytelling to help bring the memories to life. They aren't meant to represent the actual people involved. My wife passed away 5 years earlier. Since then, this house had become more than a place to sleep. It held every birthday, every Christmas morning, every family dinner we'd ever shared. I still couldn't bring myself to repaint the kitchen because my wife had picked that color herself. My daughter, Emily, and her husband, Ryan, had moved in 6 months earlier after Ryan lost his job. They promised it would only be temporary. I believed them because that's what fathers do. You don't keep score when your children need help. At first everything seemed normal. Then little things started changing. Ryan replaced furniture without asking. He invited his parents over almost every weekend. Suddenly people were calling it their place instead of mine. Every time I spoke up, Ryan laughed it off. One evening he walked into the kitchen holding a folder and said, "We've been talking, and it makes more sense if you move somewhere smaller. My parents need a house, and this one is perfect." I honestly thought he was kidding. Then he looked me straight in the eye and added, "You'll understand once you stop thinking emotionally." I looked at my daughter, hoping she'd tell him to stop. Instead, she quietly whispered something that made my heart sink even lower. "Dad, maybe we should at least talk about it." I couldn't believe what I'd just heard. Emily wouldn't even look at me. She kept twisting her wedding ring around her finger like she was trying to convince herself this conversation wasn't really happening. "Talk about what?" I asked quietly. Ryan answered before she could. "About what's best for everyone." I laughed once, but there wasn't any humor in it. "Everyone, except me." He folded his arms. "You're living here alone. My parents are getting older. They need the space more than you do." I looked around the room. Every picture on those walls had been hung by my late wife. Every scratch on the hardwood floor had a memory behind it. Somehow Ryan was talking about my home as if it were an empty building. Then he said something I'll never forget. "If you really love Emily, you'll stop making this difficult." That sentence hit me harder than anything else. Love. I'd spent my whole life proving how much I loved my daughter. I worked double shifts so she could go to college. I skipped vacations so she could have dance lessons. After her mother died, I did everything I could to make sure she never felt alone. Now I was being told that loving her meant giving up the only place that still felt like home. That night I barely slept. I kept asking myself where I'd gone wrong. Had I spoiled her? Had I ignored the warning signs? Or had Ryan slowly convinced her that I was standing in the way of the life they wanted? The next morning I called my oldest friend, Frank. He listened quietly before asking one simple question. "Whose name is actually on the deed?" I frowned. "Mine, unless something changed." Frank paused. "You might want to check before you let anyone pressure you." His words stayed with me all day. When I got home, I found movers measuring the living room. Nobody had told me they were coming. Ryan walked over with a confident smile. "My parents will be here this weekend, so we wanted to get a head start." I stared at the strangers carrying measuring tapes through my house. Not one of them asked my permission. Not one of them even introduced themselves. Have you ever felt like a stranger inside your own home? I quietly walked upstairs, opened the small fireproof box in my bedroom closet, and pulled out a thick envelope I hadn't touched in years. Inside was the original deed to the house. As I unfolded the papers, one sentence caught my eye. And suddenly, everything Ryan believed was about to fall apart. I read the deed 3 times just to make sure my eyes weren't playing tricks on me. Then I smiled for the first time in days. Years earlier, after my wife passed away, my attorney had convinced me to place the house into a living trust. At the time, I barely understood why. He simply told me, "One day, this will protect you from problems you can't even imagine." Now I finally understood. The trust clearly stated that I had the exclusive right to live in the home for the rest of my life. No one could remove me, transfer occupancy, or take possession of the property without my written approval. Ryan had never bothered to read any of it. He'd made plans based on assumptions. That evening, I watched him direct the movers as if he already owned the place. Put that couch in storage. My parents will want the guest room. We'll repaint this wall next week. Every word sounded more confident than the last. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply handed him the house keys. His smile grew even wider. I knew you'd come around, he said. I nodded. I hope everything works out the way you expect. He thought he'd won. My daughter looked relieved, but there was guilt written all over her face. She hugged me before I left. I'm sorry, Dad. I kissed her forehead. It's not too late to do the right thing. She started crying, but Ryan interrupted. We've got a lot to do. I walked out the front door carrying one small overnight bag. The neighbors watched from their porches. Some looked confused. Others looked heartbroken for me. None of them knew I wasn't giving up. I was giving Ryan exactly what he wanted. The next morning, I met my attorney for breakfast. He reviewed the trust, smiled, and made one phone call. Less than an hour later, another set of vehicles pulled into my driveway. They weren't movers. They were there for an entirely different reason. When Ryan stepped outside to see who had arrived, the color drained from his face.